Very good morning to everyone, and welcome to this policy dialogue on digitalization for the green transition, empowering community action, organized by the European Policy Center and supported by Vodafone Institute for Society and Communications. My name is Stefan Sipka. I'm head of EPC Sustainable Prosperity for Europe program, and I'll be moderating this session. We also the results of the EU elections, which arguably are not really encouraging when it comes to the green transition and keeping the ambitions on the Green Deal as high as they used to be, notwithstanding, of course, that the wheels are in motion and the implementation of the Green Deal is underway. But to ensure that and to ensure that we really ensure that we have the legitimacy and that needed and the backing of the public and the communities and citizens, we need to ensure that they are involved to a larger extent than it used to be. Of course, involvement in voting and taking part in the elections is extremely important, but arguably that is not sufficient. We need public participation, more inclusive approach, deliberative approach throughout, let's say, continuously, in order to have this, to ensure more informed decision making, and also to ensure this legitimacy that the public is providing this continuous support and the backup of the policies, the green policies, to understand why they are important, and to ensure that we actually have this long-term commitments and achieve the objectives of the Green Deal. So this is definitely crucial for this endeavor. And then we have novel, innovative technologies provided by data and digital solutions that, if steered in a proper direction, could also support these efforts to involve citizens and communities to a larger extent. This is what the EPC has been working on since last year, looking into as part of a project that we were doing also, this event being the final event as part of this project. We were looking into these possibilities. How can digitalization support citizen involvement in the green transition, and also to address the challenges associated with this transition and the role of EU policies for the way forward. This is part of our long-term effort on the twin transition that we started already in 2017, looking into different policy areas and how can digitalization serve as an enabler to support the green transition, now looking into the role of citizens. So this is the final event. As part of this project, we organized 2 workshops, 1 other public discussion, and the findings of this project will be published today as part of it as a discussion paper, which will be made publicly available, and we will be happy to share the main findings on this paper today. So we have with us today a number of interesting panelists. We're happy to have you here and to hear your reflections on this possibility to achieve the twin transition when it comes to citizen involvement for the green transition, and of course any comments, reactions to when it comes to our research. After we hear from the panelists, we will also have short interventions from the floor from also some of the participants, and then we're also continue with the Q&A with all of you, and we really hope to hear your questions and comments from participants that are here in person, and also for those who are attending online. So yeah, I would like to then shortly introduce our panelists for today. So it's a pleasure to have with us Eva Malz, Head of Unit or Strategy, Digitalization and Better Regulation and Economic Analysis from DG Environment, European Commission. Brooke, Policy Analyst at the Sustainable Prosperity for Europe program at the EPC. Elisa Lironi, Program Director for European Democracy at the European Citizen Action Service. And also Dr. Ruaraidh Dobson, Air Quality Program Manager at Trilateral Research, joining us remotely. So Without further ado, I would like to now give the floor to my colleague Brooke to present the key findings. But just one technical notice would be good that the panelists, just that we keep our interventions relatively short, 5 to 10 minutes as we discuss, so that we leave enough space for the discussion. And also to encourage the participants, especially those attending online, to write their questions as soon as they can, so we can address as many questions as possible by the end of this discussion. So yeah, these are some technical notes, and Brooke, happy to give you the floor now.
Thanks very much, Stefan, and good morning, everyone. As Stefan said, I'll be presenting the findings from the discussion paper today. And just a small note, I'm recovering from a neck injury, so if I'm moving incredibly robotically, that is why. Apologies in advance. But yes, so the discussion paper was part of a larger project, and this project was looking at how digitally enabled solutions can foster citizen engagement in the green transition. As Stefan alluded to, it began with a policy dialogue on this topic, followed by 2 workshops, one focusing more on energy communities and the other institutionally led approaches. These milestones, along with expert interviews and desk research, fed into the discussion paper, which we'll be discussing today. The paper was co-authored by myself and EPC colleagues Berta Lopez-Dominic, Laura Rayner, and Eric Maurice. And the paper was looking at the use of digital solutions within a selection of top-down and bottom-up approaches to citizen engagement in the green transition. And the aim here was to identify both current and prospective opportunities and tools to foster this engagement. So as you can see here, some of the top-down approaches or institutionally led included the Citizens' Climate Assemblies, European Citizens Initiatives, etc. And then for bottom up, or rather citizen-led, these included activism, knowledge and skills sharing, renewable energy prosumerism, where individuals are both the producer and consumer of energy, etc. In looking to opportunities, we also identified and discussed challenges. And this was an important section as it really helped frame the policy analysis, in that the goal of the policy section was to identify how the EU's policies can not only enable opportunities and provide individuals with the agency necessary to make sustainable choices, but also safeguard and mitigate against the risks identified. So getting right into the findings, or rather the opportunities first, looking at top-down, there was a lot of overlap in the tools used across various approaches. So video conferencing software, communication software that really helped facilitate and ease access to the exercises, social media platforms to increase awareness surrounding them, and just a great variety of digital platforms in general. So for one example, collaborative platforms were used quite frequently, intended for mind mapping, brainstorming, so really helping engaging during the process. And for citizens, this translates into a variety of benefits. Streamlined and easier to navigate processes for one, processes that are more accessible. Transparency was also a really big one, so helping close the feedback loop so citizens can really see how ideas and proposals are being reflected in initiatives, or not. And I'll go into 2 examples from the paper specifically just to try and exemplify this. And the first is Decidem. This was looked at in the context of the Conference of the Future of Europe, which was an EU-wide series of citizen-led discussions on topics including climate change and digital transformation. It's an open source digital platform used for a variety of participatory exercises to help facilitate and manage them. It creates proposals, conducts meeting, voting, you name it. And for the Conference of the Future of Europe, it allowed citizens across the EU to contribute online, submit, endorse, and comment on policy proposals in all of the EU's official languages, while also allowing simultaneous interpretation of the sessions. And a second example is Polis. This was looked at in the context of the Austrian Climate Assembly, also a digital platform, but more geared towards nuanced public discussions. For the assembly, it really allowed the wider public beyond assembly participants to engage in the process by submitting and responding to statements. But it's a really interesting tool because it also works towards consensus building. So it allows for not only the visualization of statements, but analysis. It allowed for opinion groups to be created based off of voting behavior, and also it allows delineation of lines on agreement, disagreement on key issues. So not only increasing engagement, but effective engagement towards policy outputs. Getting into bottom up, there were a lot of digital solutions. So I really recommend you look into the report because we definitely cannot cover all of them today. But some of the big ones discussed or looked at were digital one-stop shops. So these are online places where you can get information and guidelines on topics like establishing energy communities. Information transfer tools are another one. So like applications, for example, where you as a citizen can log on and be communicated environmental information quite easily through things like a QR code on products. Also citizen science applications where citizens can collect and then upload data on local environmental conditions. Similarly, what the benefits for citizens are is also quite varied, and there's a long list. It reduces operational costs and hurdles, encourages sustainable behavior change, increases awareness, et cetera, et cetera. And again, I'll provide 3 examples now to try and exemplify this for you. ECAS was one looked at in the paper, and it's a knowledge and network hub. So for community-based initiatives that are really focused towards sustainability. And as an initiative, you can become part of the community, attend online meetings, trainings, et cetera. But you also have access to an ECAS wiki, which is an online information archive where it compiles research and also community knowledge, enabling community learning, but also thereby action. Another example is Energy ID. So this is a digital platform that gathers, analyzes, and presents to data or citizens or energy communities, et cetera, data on their energy consumption, encouraging sustainable behavior change and action towards optimizing energy use. And the last one is quite cool. It's not a set tool, but it is actually just a grassroots movement centered around technology, and that is the Makers Movement. And it's essentially a DIY approach to public manufacturing and repairing in a more sustainable way. So on the one hand, it provides it's individuals providing open access blueprints, machine designs, et cetera, so that citizens can build sustainable products, build products more sustainably, or repair over repurchase. And on the other end of this, you have community workshops where citizens can then go and use these blueprints because they're workshops fitted with technology like 3D printers. So really citizens being given the agency to make sustainable choices, reduce resource consumption, et cetera. So that is a bit of a very brief overview of some of the opportunities and tools identified. But in so doing, we also looked at challenges. I'll very briefly go over the larger challenges that we looked into. Some of these included data privacy and cybersecurity. So not only for individuals, but also infrastructure like energy grids. There's also the spread of disinformation and misinformation on these online platforms that becomes an issue and it can undermine support for the green transition. Accessing and processing data and environmental information, and also environmental challenges themselves associated with the increased use of digital goods. So energy and water usage, material mining, e-waste, et cetera. So all of these findings fed into policy recommendations. For the sake of this presentation, I will provide a very boiled down summary of 5 more general recommendations. However, there are myriad more tangible recommendations within the paper. The first is to intensify efforts to place citizens at the heart of the twin transition, so ensuring inclusive decision-making while prioritizing the active involvement of marginalized communities and minority groups. We also recommend the institutionalization of participatory exercises like citizen assemblies at all levels, while also heavily encouraging the use of digital tools like Decidem to streamline and close feedback loops. So prioritizing that citizens can track proposals and ensure accountability of the exercises. A second recommendation is to strengthen initiatives aimed at improving digital skills and literacy to meet the EU's 2030 digital targets for digital skills and also address the digital divide. So for member states, for example, this can look like further integrating digital skills and literacy on topics like energy and data into education curricula and adult learning initiatives, complemented by communication campaigns so citizens really have an awareness of the tools at their disposal. The third recommendation is to promote open discussions about the trade-offs involved in the green transition. So this includes some of the challenges discussed earlier, like cybersecurity risks, environmental pressures, et cetera, while also conducting better research to really have a full grasp on the latter, being the environmental pressures and how to effectively mitigate against them. The fourth recommendation is to expand policy frameworks and access to digital information transfer tools, platforms, and technologies to really support individual agency to undertake sustainable practices. So for prosumerism example, this looks like establishing energy advice offices for regulatory, technical, and financial guidance, while also creating a central online hub to help citizens navigate these various initiatives at their fingertips, and thereby making this option of energy communities, prosumerism, et cetera, more available for citizens. And a fifth, the last recommendation I'll get into, encourage active participation in environmental decision-making. And this has 2 facets. On the one side, the recommendation is about streamlining participation by heavily encouraging digitalized processes at all at all levels. And on the other hand, this has to do with increasing access to environmental information to enable informed participation. And this is through electronic dissemination of information, but also ensuring that it's easy to access and navigate for citizens. So like I said, this is just a very brief summary of the myriad recommendations you can find in the paper. So I encourage you to look at it, but I think I am just about at time, so I leave it there. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brooke, for this overview of the entire work that we put into this paper and this research since last year. And of course, I won't make any comments, additional reactions myself. I was involved in the paper yourself, just to thank you for all your work, and also to other co-authors within the EPC team. Yeah, indeed, very interesting cases you can find in the paper, and the policy framework, the policy recommendations. We can agree or disagree with the suggestions we have for the way forward, but we have that it will be thought-provoking and that it will add value to your work. And of course, happy to hear then from you. What do you think about it, and how we can go forward? Just one thing to add, of course, we have also Chris Ruff, Director of Policy Strategy Outreach and Communications from Digital Europe. Apologies, because yesterday we received the final confirmation. So I was reading a bit slightly outdated agenda, but indeed happy to have also you, representative of Digital Europe, join this panel, and also to looking forward to hearing from you as well. But now I would like to turn to Eva Malz for your initial reflections on this topic, and also what you heard from Brooke, and maybe some overview of relevant EU policies in this.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Brooke. Thank you for having me today with you. I feel honored because EPC is one of the think tanks that I followed extremely closely throughout the years of my career. But even earlier as a student, I was fascinated by the wealth of research work and policy recommendations that were coming from the EPC. So it's a pleasure to be here with you on this sunny June morning. And I'm also positively approaching this topic because despite a certain green transition fatigue that some people, especially in Brussels, feel, I think there are a lot of positive feedback coming from both citizens, but also businesses, regions, local authorities, cities, that confirm that the green transition, the green virus, as I personally called it, is there. And there is a movement that started 5 years ago with the Green Deal agenda that is continuing and forcefully on the way. We have seen the first draft strategic agenda of the leaders that will be adopted this week at the summit. And I can assure that in this draft version that I assume some of you might have seen, the digital and green transitioning features very prominently. And I think, I hope, at least I do my best in my humble position to pass this information to our political masters in order to keep the momentum, keep the continuity. Now, starting on this positive and really optimistic tone, I do admit that social acceptance is the ultimate precondition for commitment to a certain policy and also for behavioral change. Without this commitment, without this ground support, it's difficult to make a certain policy have a real impact. So how do we achieve this political commitment, this social acceptance, and the ensuing behavioral change? I would start based also on the excellent recommendations from your draft paper that I had the pleasure to have a look at, and I learned a few new things. New terms, hacktivism, that's a term I have never heard of, very, very interesting concept. I see sort of two levels of action, or two spheres where the green and digital can work, can reinforce each other to achieve this social commitment. The one sphere for me is the political level of engagement and community level. These are sort of different levels, but entail a certain action, a certain inspiration, and certain mechanisms that are available to the citizens to, if you want, express their sympathy. The political level is the citizens' assembly that we talked about. First of all, voting in the elections, in the European elections that we had just now. 2024 is a year of elections. So we have multiple occasions at regional, local level to express our preferences. And these are, let's say, organized, democratically organized processes that we should not undermine in terms of force that they bring. Just to refer to the massive participation in my own country, Poland, last October. This was not, stimulated digitally. It was not a propaganda type of exercise. On the contrary, the propaganda from the public media was actually going the other direction. But the sense of political duty, of a civic duty, going to the poll and expressing and having the debate in the public space, I think this is the core that we should give value. And of course, citizens panels and this type of more direct participation are super useful. The Conference on the Future of Europe gave a huge wealth of ideas of also the feeling of linking between the European level, the citizens level. But these are not, let's say, there to replace the actual political activity of a voter. But there is in between this community level where all of us have some certain type of engagement, be it at the village level, be it at the quarter level, be it a parent at school level, or other type of initiatives. And you, Brooke, you have referred to a couple of them, where this active engagement, being part of the society, can be strengthened at daily level. And here I would say a massive potential for digital to give the information, to share, to create transparency. But let's not fool ourselves. Data is not enlightening people. It's the processing of this data. It's the, data on air quality is interesting, but unless I have access to it, maybe on my app, and that's the type of environmental data that has made it to the citizen, then I can, express a preference at community level. I thank my mayor for making effort to make the air quality in my city better. So it's at the end, the application, the concrete use that we can give to the citizen that is creating this transparency and giving citizens the tools. And I think here, the examples that Brooke had given are going this sort of the direction. But apart from the political engagement and community engagement, I think green and digital can do wonders on the marketplace. And here, I mean, not only us as consumers, but also us as producers, as manufacturers, as people working in the banking sector, you name it. Marketplace is a place where we are all active. We might not have the time to go to a citizen panel because we are so busy in our working day, but we are all acting, we are purchasing goods for food, for clothes, we are perhaps renovating our house, perhaps taking interest in the type of transport, what kind of car am I using? So here, the playground for the green and digital is immense. I think sky is the limit, and we have just seen the beginning of it. Starting with precision farming, smart mobility, energy efficiency in buildings, smart buildings, all that is a possible way to change, to get the commitment actually and to change our behavior. And let me just mention one area where I think in the next mandate, we will try to make an emphasis and hopefully bring the solutions that are there being developed is the traceability of sustainable supply chains, because sustainable products are attractive. They are attractive to the consumers. They are attractive to the brands because they can get more sales, if you want. But how do we prove, how do we trace that this coffee is actually not coming from deforestation? How do we trace, how do we check that this type of garment, let's say a t-shirt, a dress, is coming from a recycled cotton and not original virgin material? Digital technologies can help both businesses and consumers in making these choices, and sustainable traceability of sustainable products is one area where I think we will see big shifts in the coming years. So I would finish here. I'm happy to have your questions.
Thank you so much, Eva, for your reflections. And indeed, just to pick on some of the points, to reiterate them, indeed, that the public participation is not a replacement of the political engagement and the voting itself. It's something that can build on that and provide additional space, indeed, for the citizens to contribute with their input, with their comments to particular topics when it's of relevance to them, and in that sense, it's something that complements rather than the political engagement instead of replacing it. And for that, indeed, the data. Access to data is important. It's not sufficient. It's also about making this data actionable and available via, let's say, in a convenient way, so that different citizens and communities can benefit from them. And also, besides, let's say, public participation, deliberative approach, and voting, also we have the role of citizens as consumers, as economic actors, as prosumers. And by taking action in this way and creating enabling conditions like the one you mentioned on the traceability, on different policies that the EU is developing, on the eco-design regulation, on a number of other initiatives, they can contribute to this change, and arguably can translate, this economic engagement can translate also into political and social change on a wider scale. Thank you, and happy to come back to some of these points at a later stage. But now I'd like to turn to Elisa Lironi for your initial remarks.
Okay, thank you very much. So, well, my name is Elisa. I work for the European Citizen Action Service as the Program Director on European Democracy. We're an NGO based here in Brussels, for those of you who don't know us yet. And we have been for more than 30 years basically empowering citizens to exercise their rights in the European Union. And of course, one of the rights is the right to also participate in the making of the Union. And my expertise, actually from almost a decade now, is really around digital democracy. So thanks again for inviting me. I will focus my, let's say, brief overview on digital democracy and specifically e-participation. So how can we get citizens to actually use these digital tools and in the best case scenario, contribute to democracy by co-creating legislations with policymakers. So first of all, maybe just a brief introduction of what digital democracy is. Maybe you already know about it, but it's interaction between the government and the citizens by using ICT, so information communication technologies. We have notions such as e-government, which obviously, you know, it's how you pay your taxes how you declare your taxes online, anything regarding the public administration. That's one aspect of digital democracy. Then we also have e-transparency as an aspect, which is how the government makes documents more transparent, how they showcase to citizens how legislative procedures work, everything online, everything very transparent. And the last one, which is the one I focus on, is really on e-participation, meaning how can we use digital tools so that citizens can actually interact with their governments, and in the best case scenario, as I said, co-create legislations together and policy making. So this is really the one that I focus on. What we see at the EU level, since we're an NGO at the EU level, is that there are very limited ways for which EU citizens can actually have some sort of say at the Commission or at the Parliament. This has been shown also by Brooke in her slide. We have the European Citizens Initiative. You all know about it, most probably. It's sort of a petition, 1 million signatures, and you get something at the agenda, and the Commission can decide or not to start a legislative ether. We have the consultations of the different DGs, you know them, the online public consultations. There also, it's mainly for stakeholders with some sort of expertise, but as a citizen, you can also contribute. E-petitions at the European Parliament, but only on legislations that are already existing, mainly to modify them. Then other ways that we've seen, Conference of the Future of Europe, which basically started off the whole citizens' assemblies at the European Commission level, and obviously the Ombudsman, for example, you can also write to her. So these are basically the official ways. Unofficial ways that I've seen, which were really interesting, certain MEPs actually using digital tools to open up an own initiative report. So mainly getting people to crowdsource ideas for them. Unfortunately, I've only seen it in the past by Green MEPs. So good for them because they're very transparent. They're really focused on engagement. I would love to see it more by EPP, S&D, but this is something that I always encourage MEPs to actually do, to open up, the reports and the making. So as I said, what we've seen at ECAS is that these digital tools are just simply not enough, like to get people's participation. So one thing we've been pushing for in these 10 years almost is crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing, I won't get into it, but it's just basically a mass, it's getting people to contribute online in mass, so a lot of people, and basically trying to have some sort of impact on legislation or on policy. Very well-known crowdsourcing was the one in Iceland, where basically after the economic crisis in 2007, 2008, basically the Icelandic government decided that they needed to gain trust from citizens in Iceland again. So they opened the crowdsourcing on their constitution, which is really interesting. It was one of the first done worldwide. So it was really interesting to see how basically people could have a say on such an important document and try to get their government to adopt it. Unfortunately, it stalled in the parliament, never happened, but very, very interesting learning process to see how digital democracy can actually help citizens co-create constitutions or even legislations. So at ECAS, just to give you a small idea of what we've been doing, in the past 3 years, we implemented a very big project called the Code Europe, funded under the EEA grants. It was a big project, which was also coupled with a sister project called DigiDem, financed by the European Commission. And we basically crowdsourced in 10 different cities in Europe on air quality. So we did it in 4 different phases. It lasted 1 year. So the 4 different phases was, first of all, we just went to citizens and we just asked them, what are your problems with air quality? Like, what is your daily issue with air quality? Just go outside, tell us what your problem is. This is very interesting because obviously in the 10 different cities, we had very, very different answers depending on what was implemented in the city. Some, for example, in Burgas, it was very different from what was in Brussels. In Brussels, a lot of complaints around private cars, for example, which was not the case in other countries like in Estonia, in Latvia. So we really had 10 different cities giving very different answers. So we just said that In the second phase, we asked them, now that you told us your problems, can you tell us your solutions? What do you want your politicians to do? We didn't specify local, national, EU level. That doesn't matter. We kept it as simple as possible for citizens. And we basically said, just tell us your solutions for it. In the third one, we asked them to vote. Vote the top 10 priorities. What do you want to move forward as a priority at the short term? And we'll keep the other ones at the long term. The fourth phase was really co-creation. So we made a document between the citizens and the European Environmental Bureau. So that was our expert partner in environmental issues to come up with a document, which we then sent to the Commission. We sent to the MEPs because last year they were all working on the air quality directive, the new ones, and this year it's still continuing. So we tried to do advocacy at that sense at the EU level. Now, how did we have impact on the local level? In the local level, for example, we reached out to Minister Marron, who was really interesting because in his portfolio, he was both the Minister for Participatory Democracy and for environmental issues. So we thought he's perfect to be basically the patron of the air quality in Brussels. We got him on board since the beginning. He decided to help us with the video to promote this. And then in the final event, he actually came to our event where we handed over citizens' recommendations and he pledged to basically take them into consideration in their policy. So in his policies around environmental issues in Brussels. So that was really interesting. And then we also came up with basically what we learned out of this whole crowdsourcing of air quality. We have a few of these publications if you're interested, but we did come up with a series of what went wrong and how can we fix it and how can we bring crowdsourcing also at the EU level. Because this is really interesting. And I have written a book chapter in which I also think that crowdsourcing can be parallel to consultation processes, because while consultations at the EU level are very, very technical and specific, and citizens don't feel like they want to answer because they don't feel like they have the knowledge, crowdsourcing is more about the mass. It's more about, can you help us identify what the problems are, what you think are the solutions? So out of the box thinking that policymakers can actually take and say, okay, this is a problem. Like so many people are saying it's a problem. Let's try to identify how we can, implement some sort of policy and legislation that can tackle it. So this has been a project that we ended and we have a bunch of recommendations we can discuss later. Feel free to ask me questions. We did have around a few thousands of actual contributions from the 10 cities. So the reach was far more. It was like around different phases had like around 50,000 people who actually went to the crowdsourcing platform. The contributions themselves were around 2,000, so really practical ones. And yeah, so we're going to be, we have been proposing to the Commission, to the European Parliament and other institutional actors also to put crowdsourcing as one of the official mechanisms that in the policy cycle could work really well, always to capture, these contributions. And yeah, so I will mainly stop here. We have a next project which is kicking off where we will do exactly the same thing, but this time on digital transformation in the different countries, linking to the fact that now there are national roadmaps that are trying to basically be in line with the digital decade of the European Commission. So we're basically going to go from next year to different cities and asking citizens how they think the digital transformation in Europe can be more inclusive. And we'll still be using crowdsourcing as a digital tool, a digital mechanism in order to get citizens to have an impact, especially on their local authorities, and to give recommendations to the EU. So happy to answer about that as well.
Thank you. Very much, Elisa, and also for highlighting this very interesting example of crowdsourcing for also when it comes to the clean air agenda, and also to, in a way, stress the importance of, besides climate action and environmental protection more generally, the air quality, and was very much on the agenda last year, and it was good to put an effort to hear, let's say, the voice of the wider public on this topic, and also for making this distinction between the crowdsourcing as a method and public participation at the EU level. You mentioned knowledge gap, and happy to come back to that point in particular. And just as a short follow-up question, besides the project, I mean, that you did for the clean air, looking ahead, are there any possibilities or any ideas that this can be to expand upon that when it comes to the green agenda in particular, not necessarily on clean air, but also comes to other green topics?
Yes, definitely. I mean, these sorts of methods can be implemented very well for any sort of topic, like not only green. I think that it is crucial to do it on environmental policies. And we also have a project in ECAS around just transition, because I feel like in both digital transformation policies and in environmental policies, we cannot leave citizens behind in the process. We need to make sure that there is knowledge, understanding, because these policies will actually have an impact on their daily lives. They'll see it immediately. And if we don't get them on board, there's going to be citizens' rage and frustration, and we'll see them on the streets. So for me, it's always better that policymakers are transparent and open and engage with citizens from the start. And now digital tools really allows us to be more efficient and democracy more widespread, because you can imagine all the citizens' assembly of the commission, they cost millions, because of the fact that you need to bring people here, people don't have time, there's so many barriers. But with digital tools, if it's secure, people trust it, and if you explain to citizens, look, this is a serious process that we're implementing, they will trust the system. We did a lot of convincing. I have other recommendations, but I think that it is a very good way at the EU level, because you're trying to reach out to so many countries and so many different cultures and so many different languages. I don't see how else we can do it if we don't put an efficient, digital democracy mechanism to get citizens on board on, just transition, digital transformation, inclusiveness in all of this.
Thank you so much for this additional comments. So yeah, indeed, we happy to then continue discussion based on that too. But I would like to now give the floor to Ruaraidh Dobson, again, going to the virtual world, and hope you hear us well, and happy to hear from you.
Wonderful, thank you so much, Stefan. I'm really grateful to be invited here today. Talk a little bit about the work that Trilateral Research is doing in this area. I think it's interesting. Eva, I really liked your you mentioned the sort of engagement with the market elements of this, because we're and I think that's a really interesting, really vital point here. Trilateral Research is a private company. We're based partly in London, where I am, and partly in Waterford in the Republic of Ireland. And we work in a range of different areas. We provide research services and consultancy services, particularly around cybersecurity, data ethics, law enforcement, and of course air quality and climate and environment, as well as a range of other services around the development of ethical AI and similar tools. And I think I guess what I'd like to just briefly touch on are some things I'm really pleased to hear have been covered a little bit, so I don't need to rabbit on for too long. What our approach is in practice as we take solutions to the market, as a company, essentially a tech company that is not focused on technical solutions, but is, as everyone has said so far, is focused on enabling citizen action and social solutions for environmental issues, for citizen engagement issues, and more widely. I have a couple of slides, if you don't mind, I'm just going to share. That's assuming I'm able to do so. I will just quickly, these are really more of an aid memoir for me. I hope you can see those now.
Not really, to be honest, but now it's work in progress. Yeah, almost there. Yes, perfect. We see it now.
Okay, I'm aware this might be a little small on the screen, so I'm not going to go through this in great depth. I just wanted to talk about three different projects or solution sets that we've been working on. And the first is a product I've been involved in developing with our tech team called Striad Air, which is a tool to take the air quality data that's collected around the huge amounts of air quality data are collected across, particularly across high-income countries, but across across the entire world, and more data is being collected. And my academic background is in air quality and behavior change, so I'm very excited by the possibilities of using this data. But it's exactly that I'm excited about. It's not just about collecting the data. It's about developing ways to use that data to turn it into something that is helpful for growing citizen engagement, for growing understanding of the need for specific policies, and growing the ability of individual citizens to change or to develop the direction of those policies for themselves. And so I wanted to talk briefly about Ruaraidh Air, which is a product that principally shows on a really hyper-local level, uses good epidemiological models to understand how air pollution specifically, when we have a few other models in development, can affect the health of individuals in really small areas, down to a few hundred households in some cases. So we can understand the and share with citizens not just the frankly rather dry data about air quality being above or below this specific limit, or 20 micrograms per cubic meter, or this or that, the next thing, numbers that are really quite difficult to turn into meaning. And we can take those and turn them into something that is a bit more meaningful. And we've done this through a project with Meath County Council in the Republic of Ireland, where we worked with them to co-develop a process of monitoring air quality in the town of Trim in the Republic, and develop a bespoke dashboard and data store for them to share that data with citizens, but then to go beyond just sharing the data with citizens and turn it into actionable insights that can help Meath County Council make the case for change, but also engage with citizens on what that change should look like. So, for instance, we measured air quality outside a number of schools on a particularly busy road, and we could see the very evidently the spikes in air quality, or in air pollution, I should say, around about pickup and drop off time. And using that information, we went into schools and we gave this information to young people, but we also took that information from our sensing, from modeling done by the Environmental Protection Agency in the Republic, and from publicly available data, and turned that into an understanding of what that looked like in Trim. Trim's quite a small town. Trim's about 9,000 people in total, but each year, based on the data that we have, we'd expect to see 6 cases of asthma due to this unnecessary air pollution. And that obviously has a huge effect on children in the town. It also has a huge effect on productivity. It has a huge effect on ongoing costs for the healthcare system. And that's just one condition, that's asthma. And if we look at our results and we apply those across the whole of the Republic of Ireland, you can see upwards of 300 lives being saved by reducing air pollution by 20%. And again, the reason I'm talking about this is less because, I mean, this kind of forecasting modeling it has been possible to do for a long time. It's more because we can take that data now, and using the huge amounts of open data that are available, we can take that and apply it to these really small areas and give that to people, give that to citizens to engage with. And that's how we're doing something, doing another project, again involving our Ruaraidh Air software, to mitigate the harm of air pollution in the city of Waterford in the southeast of Ireland. And what we're doing there is working in a citizen science-led way with schools in the city to show young people the data that exists on how air quality varies across the town, or the city, I should say, and then work with them to develop software-led tools to map routes to schools. So rather than just going in and saying, hey, well, air quality is bad here, air quality is better here, you should use this route instead, we want to take a co-design approach and really a citizen-led approach to these kinds of problems. How we can engage with young people to understand what's actually important, what's actually influencing their decisions. Obviously there could be public safety concerns. There could be, the influence of green space. There could be the influence of all kinds of things that I can't understand because I'm not in that setting. And I think that's a really important way that we can use this kind of tech to enable citizens to make these kinds of decisions for themselves. And I think Elisa, you mentioned the that kind of citizen anger that we've seen across Europe. Certainly, as you mentioned, lots of elections. As I say, I live in the UK, and we're having an election of our own at the moment, in which that is very much on display. And that kind of I tend to agree. I think that anger comes from a feeling of disempowerment, and by a process of genuine engagement, and rather than kind of technocratic solution creation from the top, you can engage with that citizen anger and turn it into or engage with it before it happens and turn it into productive action and demonstrate that productive action is possible. And again, these are some of the approaches that we're starting to take. So trying to really dive in as far as we can to working with younger people, working with communities in these issues. We're also working on a project called Data Cellar, looking at how we can influence and support the creation of local energy communities, and how we can build out the tools that allow communities to develop these local energy communities for themselves, and how we can ensure that again these sorts of solutions can't be enforced from the top. They have to be ground up. They have to be something that people can feel in control of. And I think that's really one of the key elements here, that we're very focused on data sovereignty and data ethics. So control of individual data in these kinds of settings. And I think that's another really important way to build citizen trust in these kinds of policy environments. So as I say, I wanted to just give you a brief flavor of what we do. I'm very happy to talk more about that, but thank you again for inviting me, and I'll hand back to the chair.
Very much, Rory, and also for sharing these interesting cases. Again, going back to the air quality topic, I think to some extent it's somewhat natural, because there is an interesting nexus between environment, air quality, and public health, and something that is of direct interest to citizens, or more easily perceived to be something of direct interest to them. And it's interesting what you shared. How can digital tools, including AI, also be used to help improve or to direct citizen behavior in a way that can also be good for them, and also to account for this challenge posed by air pollution. But also when it comes to your project on energy communities, something that we have been looking into as part of our research and the paper we published. So very interesting prospects in that area as well. And also noted what you said, like about the importance of this kind of approaches and difficulties when it comes to top-down approach. But I won't leave it at that. We'll be happy to continue this discussion and to see how we can address some of these challenges in the continuation of the discussion. But thank you for now. And last but not the least, Chris, Ruff, happy again that you managed to take part in this panel, and would be great to hear your reflections, also what you heard thus far from the panelists, but your additional thoughts about the role of digitalization, data and digital tools in supporting citizens' public engagement in the green transition.
Thank you, Stefan. And thank you for inviting me. I'm sorry I came a bit late last night, but it's true. So I work at Digital Europe. We represent around 45,000 digital and digitalizing companies, from the very biggest tech companies in the world to SMEs in far corners of Europe, or 2 or 3 people, software companies as well. Lots of banks and car companies are now seeing themselves as digital companies as well. So that membership is growing. Now, I'm going to come to a couple of the points raised in the report, actually, to 2 of the specific solutions, because a lot of our members are actually creating these solutions and being part of that process directly. But first, I want to take my Digital Europe hat off for a second and put my other hat on, which is I'm on the board here of an NGO in Brussels called Restless Brussels. Okay, and some of you might know it, but it was essentially a group of international people frustrated at the lack, essentially living in a bubble. not engaging with the Belgian local democracy. Okay. And the core reason for this is that, in Brussels, it's the second most international city in the world after Dubai. If everybody registered to vote from the international community, would be a third of voters in the city. Okay. But the actual figure of registering to vote, and I'm talking about local elections here, so commune elections. We thought all the elections in Europe were behind us. No, in Belgium in October, there's some commune elections that all EU citizens and other citizens can vote in, right? So there's only 17% of people are registered to vote of that huge community here in Brussels. And one of the reasons why is that it was damn difficult. Okay, you had to go to the commune or send a piece of paper in the post. And that was one of the reasons why people didn't do it. So for this election, for the first time, you can register online with It's Me, that many of you will know in this room, the Belgian e-government service. You can do it in 2 minutes. So we're hoping for a big spike this year, but there was actually a survey done at the last election as to why we in this room, we were not registering to vote. And actually the complicated process, that was only 10-12% of people. So it wasn't the major reason. The major reason, so 50% of people didn't vote because they'd heard in Belgium that if you register to vote, it's compulsory. And then if you don't vote, you get punished, right? Okay. We'll leave aside the fact that people don't ever get really punished here in Belgium, but it just goes to show you that, and this might sounds strange coming from me at Digital Europe, but digital solutions are part of the solution, but they're not a silver bullet as well. But they can reduce that friction, that administrative friction that we have with our local governments and things like that. So, and at local level, in Belgium, I'm sure it's the same in other countries as well. There's a lot of important decisions made for the green transition around housing, around mobility, so the public transport, the way that the roads are set up, etc., urban planning, all of these things which are really key. So I want to talk about one thing that was mentioned on one of the slides from you, Brooke, which is the digital product passport. And this comes back to what you were talking about, Eva, on the sustainability of products. This is a key issue for the green transition. We all have devices, sometimes multiple devices that we use for several years, then we get rid of them in some way. And the aim, of course, is that more people recycle them. They use them because they've got key components in there or materials that can be used again. So the digital product passport, in a nutshell, it comes from a regulation from the Commission, but it's a project with different partners, including Digital Europe. We represent, for example, Samsung, Lenovo, lots of companies that make laptops. And what it does, in essence, it will have a little QR code on every product. And then you look at that QR code, and within that, you can see where it was made, where the components came from, so there's a bit of the supply chain, and crucially, where you can recycle it as well, because this is, again, a lot of the friction that we see from citizens not recycling things is simply it's too complicated, not knowing where to do it. But yeah, it also creates prosumers because you can see, well, when you're buying the product, okay, where has it been made? Where have the components come from? What materials is it made of? And that's crucial as we want to engage citizens as well. Now, it sounds very simple. Obviously, it's a lot more complicated than that because there's a huge amount of data behind that needs to be interoperable. The idea is it's a decentralized data set, so it's not all held within the European Commission and multiple data everywhere, which makes it even more complicated. But we're on the right track with this as well for empowering citizens. Another thing you mentioned as one of the solutions was one-stop shops. Now, when we've talked about one-stop shops recently at Digital Europe, it's been about the fact that if you're a small company and an SME could be 3 people. I know we talk about citizens here, but SMEs are made up of citizens as well. And a lot of the green backlash we see has come from farmers, which are SMEs, small companies, let's say. So I think the line is blurred there between citizens and very small SMEs. So from when we look at it, it's about how lots of regulations come from the EU level on digital in the last 5 years. You also have regulation coming from your national level. And it's kind of impossible if you're a 3-person company to try and see where all that, how it all fits together and what do I actually have to do. You want to comply, but it's difficult. right? So a one-stop shop could be a solution to that. You go in your own language, in your own member state, you see exactly how I'm supposed to comply with all of this different legislation. But it also made me think of my time as a citizen. Well, I'm still a citizen, but trying to navigate the European Union websites when I wanted to look at funding for my, education, when I wanted to apply for Erasmus, when I wanted to apply for an internship here at the European Commission. Very, very difficult, as I'm sure many of you know. It's improved a lot, I must say, the European Commission, the way it's communicated, but it's still a barrier. So the more that you can centralize all this information in a way for citizens and small businesses to either comply with legislation or access information, that's a huge tool that I think it came up in your report, but it's definitely one of the most important for us. And I want to end with a couple of stats, because in our manifesto for this next mandate, we set a lot of targets for the European Union on digital. One of which is that we're all using e-government services, or at least they're all accessible online for citizens to use. And this is something that we've seen a huge leap forward after COVID, for obvious reasons. We weren't able to visit our local authorities, but we're around 77% of all government services accessible online for citizens. But one of the most shocking statistics in there is that only 52, so half of citizens in Europe have basic digital skills, okay? And what do we mean when we say basic digital skills? That's accessing the internet, making a search, emailing somebody. So, I mean, that's always shocking when you work in an environment like this where you assume everybody is like that. But those basic digital skills are a prerequisite for all the beautiful things we've talked about today. Those 48% of citizens are not going to be engaging in, online crowdsourcing necessarily if they're not able to access this. So it should be a huge priority for the next commission. I know it is, and I know it's complicated because education is not a commission or a centralized competence, but it must be a huge priority for the next 5 years, member states and all together working on this.
Thank you very much, Chris, and also for pointing out to these examples also about the possibilities for using digitalization and to expand on to empower the citizens to take part in the political processes. Also in voting, what's happening in Brussels, you say the low response rate in the elections, which paradoxically are also compulsory. Here, also interesting point about the one-stop shops that can provide this, say, information in a more convenient and efficient way to citizens, but also the fact that even in case of crowdsourcing, so we talked about top challenges with top-down approaches, but even, let's say, for crowdsourcing, there can still be this there is still this digital illiteracy or knowledge gaps that can be present and that can actually hamper this efforts to bring people on board and to hear what they have to what the key problems are and what needs to be done in this case. So thank you for now, and again, happy to come back to some of these points. But yeah, we heard from our panelists, and I would like to now go to the audience, and we already received received an interest from a couple of participants to provide their interventions. So I would, in that sense, like to give the floor to Jules Schiltz, you Public Affairs Manager from Huawei Technologies, because I know you would be interested to provide some of your reactions also, and also if you have any questions to the panel.
All right, thank you very much. So as you said, my name is Jules Schiltz. I'm representing Huawei Digital Power in Brussels. We're a branch of Huawei that deals with clean energy productions, providing power electronics and smart solutions, particularly in the photovoltaics, PV photovoltaics systems. So firstly, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to EPC, Brooke, Stefan for the organization of this insightful and engaging event on these important topics. And as we are all here today, we advocate for a faster and more inclusive green transition. But I would like to take this opportunity to pick up on a very important concept when it comes to empowering empowering community engagement for the green transition, which is prosumerism. We know that electricity demand is continuously growing, notably with the increasing uptake of the EVs in Europe. Renewable will gradually replace fossil fuels as our main energy source, and will account for 42.5% in Europe by 2030. This means that over time, we will be injecting more and more green watts into the grids, and this requires more flexibility. And another megatrend that we see rising is the decentralization of the energy systems. And I'm coming to my question. And that's where we see an opportunity for citizens and the communities to be empowered by shifting from being consumers to being prosumers, with the possibility of producing, consuming, share locally, create the electricity, create energy communities, work with neighbors and with their local communities for the production and sharing of electricity. So maybe a question for the whole, to anyone in the panel, what is missing from the current EU legislative framework to make this a reality? And do you feel there is a need for at least a common framework of understanding, even for a common definition of what a prosumer is, to advance on this endeavor? Thank you.
Much, Jules, for your comments and your question. And we also have Sebastian Rodriguez with us, a campaign manager from European Movement International.
Hello, can you hear me in the room?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, and good morning. Thank you for the European Policy Center for inviting us in the capacity of the European Movement International. And it's great to see so many colleagues and partners here with whom we collaborate on exactly this topic, on citizen deliberation, also digital in the green and just transition. So for example, with the colleagues from Trilateral, we run a project, a EU-funded project called Real Deal, where we actually, that is it's a research project whose main goal is to provide recommendations on how we can make the green and just transition closer to the people. And I really like this policy paper. I think it's going to be next to me for the rest of the duration of the project. And I really congratulate the team behind it. I would like to, however, put some a question out there, and maybe I'm gonna be also sharing what we are thinking in the European movement in terms of what's gonna be next, and it's in the context of artificial intelligence. I would like to know what the panelists think about, what are the actual practical implications of artificial intelligence in citizen deliberation, in the green transition, but also further than that. We are really interested in looking at the possibilities around enhanced sortition, like using AI to support sortition, ensuring diversity and representation by analyzing, for example, demographic data to make sure that we get balanced and representative samples for citizen assemblies and panels. This idea, which is quite interesting, about mass online deliberation. So this is, again, developing an AI-driven platform where thousands of people, if not more, can actually deliberate together, and then the system would manage the clustering of ideas, facilitate discussions, integrate contributions, and always ensuring that we create an inclusive and safe space for everyone. Another idea out there is this rotating mini publics, which is setting up randomly selected multiple randomly selected assemblies that rotate participants, and then AI would facilitate these processes, ensuring, again, this diverse representation and managing the information flow effectively. In this context, AI for facilitation, real-time translation, especially relevant for pan-European processes like the ones we are experiencing in the European Union right now, fact-checking, clustering, aggregation of ideas, and really, in a sense, also creating, since we're also talking about community action, Where do you see platforms like Decidi, with whom we collaborate also in the context of the Real Deal, but also others in making all these technologies transparent and open software or open source software and ready available for civil society, for citizens, for governments to use it with all the guarantees. And also, I'm not by any means, I'm not trying to go away from the potential risk that this technology has, but we are optimists and we see that there are more opportunities than risk. But I would like also to hear from the panelists on whether maybe for the next policy paper, we can already start thinking about how artificial intelligence can be leveraged in this field. And thank you again. Thank you everyone for this very insightful chat.
Thank you, Sebastian, also for your comments and for these additional questions, especially on the role of AI in supporting the empowering public deliberation, public inclusion, and also on making sure that these platforms, information shared, and the systems that enable us to exchange this information and enable citizens to be involved, that they are open, as transparent as possible. And yeah, then happy to come back to our panel. And perhaps Eva, we could talk about a bit more about policies, and I think some of the points that were made by both the panelists, but also coming from our respondents for today, were also about could be addressed by having an enabling policy framework. We talked about the top-down approaches in citizen involvement, for example, how we can improve it to incentivize citizen involvement, to encourage citizens or to empower them. We talked about prosumerism, and you mentioned the ongoing work on traceability, but happy for you if you can maybe expand a bit upon that, and how can EU policies support prosumerism for the green transition, and different tools also, if you have anything to add what was just now discussed on data, on AI, based on your work thus far, and any other reflections in terms of how can EU policies help address or support some of the initiatives, address some of the challenges that we heard from our panelists and participants today.
Thank you, Stefan, for this for focusing the question for me, because it has been a very rich debate among the panelists, and very interesting examples that I will dive into after the meeting. So thank you for bringing the wealth of knowledge and actionable data. I will say very carefully one thing about policy making in general, because one could have the impression from today's discussion that European policy is a top-down policy, and there is a shortage of democratic legitimacy of it. And I just want to say that the Green Deal, let's not forget, it is a response to the green movement, the climate action of young people that President von der Leyen saw in 2019, that went to the streets and they said there is something out there, climate change, biodiversity loss, that is threatening our future. And I think in seeking to perfectionize the policy making, we should not forget that there was this fundamental shift that actually came bottom up. It didn't come top down, it actually came bottom up and was picked up by the politicians and has started a certain shift in thinking. And this shift in thinking is not only at EU level, also at national, local, regional. It's inspiring mayors to make real changes. And this is actually a success. So I think that should be said and acknowledged. In the paper, there is also a reference to the trade-offs, that there is a need to speak about the trade-offs. Here, I would have a little doubt in saying to which extent the discussion of the trade-offs is important, or to which extent the discussion on how to mitigate these potential undesired effects of certain policies, because at the end of the day, policy making is a flexible tool. It's not just one regulation. There is always a problem and the way how you go about this problem. So let's take carbon pricing as a potentially policy measure that is affecting so-called competitiveness of the European industry. But there is actually an external instrument called CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, that is helping to shift the attention of the third countries to introduce similar policies so that we have a level playing field. There is energy moving to the renewable energy, which is a huge success. I mean, under this mandate, we had more electricity produced from renewable energy sources compared to fossil fuel sources. Meanwhile, there is also a peak in energy prices because of the reason why we are moving out so massively out of fossil fuels. I don't mention Russia and Ukraine. But there are certain adjustments that need to be made. And these are taking measures to address the energy poverty, to help prosumers create their own energy and consume it, or maybe even sell it. So I think the thinking in terms of trade-off is a little bit dangerous, because trade-offs and problems are divisive. And I think the value of actions and community engagement like the one of ECAS is the one to identify solutions, and the solutions that citizens want, that they feel this is the way we want to go. And this level of community engagement is invaluable. I mean, Brussels cannot do it for every single community. It's the different, as I call it, levels of engagement that we all have. I don't know, I have a sympathy for my region, and each time the director of the regional office asks me to make an intervention here or at the university, I do it because I feel part of this community. That's where I come from. And this is where you get my engagement. But I got 3 times an invitation to be part of a citizens panel in Brussels. And sorry, at this time of the day, there's no way I can make time for it. So my level of engagement will be depending also on what I identify with. And this is where the power of these organizations. But coming to the prosumers, I think it's a very interesting idea. Thank you for bringing this. I think there should be more focus in the future on how to give access to information, to actionable information, and empower prosumers. But there is always, I can tell you, because I'm part of the commission, this feeling of crossing the border of legislating lifestyles. And this, we know, people don't like. People don't like to be dictated what should be my lifestyle. They feel much better if they feel like they have the agency, they have the choice, they choose for it. And there are certain choices that are much better at the local level. So how to make these, let's say, even regulatory tools or other type of tools to empower the consumer or the prosumer, but without imposing the lifestyle. I would say this is the type of challenge that we are struggling with. And with the AI, I think this is another area that we will see growing more and more. Ruaraidh mentioned the ethical AI solutions, how to bring data that are actually giving concrete information to students based on different data sets analysis. These are the routes that are actually with better quality. Or energy has been mentioned, which is another area very important to citizens. I will bring biodiversity or water, how water scarcity or water quality is, how can I know that in my city, my water is safe? Is there PFAS or not? I mean, this type of information and data sets that are being analyzed and credible and transparent and provable, these are elements that can empower citizens and consumers. So I'm looking forward to the next 10 years to see more of it flourishing, and I hope that it will help to advance the path on green transition and digital transition, hand in hand.
Thank you for your response, Eva, and indeed there are additional possibilities to explore in a way. Also, the Green Deal itself being a response to, let's say, citizen demand for more action on the green transition, building, of course, on decades of work on the environmental and climate policies, but the Green Deal being really something that add additional value as a response to the green wave that happened 5 years ago. And then it's important to see how do we keep this momentum and how do we keep citizens involved during the elections, but also beyond the election as part of this deliberation, but also as part of other, using other mechanisms like prosumerism to make this change happen. And indeed, it's very much about actionable data you mentioned, but also sometimes convenience. Indeed, like if you receive an invitation to join a citizen panel during the day or a certain time of the year where it's clear that it's very busy, the chances people will show up will be rather limited. So it's important to see how they get involved, because this public involvement, public participation is also about citizen engagement, but also there are other mechanisms like under the Aarhus Convention on different projects where citizens can be encouraged and empowered by different means to be let's say invest their time and effort to talk about it. And it's about knowledge, I would say, but also arguably it's about that they are not really afraid or concerned if there is something they don't know, that they would look like, I don't know, embarrass themselves because they don't know. But actually, even if they are not experts, their local insights or just their voices, citizens, could still feed into the discussion and help make better decisions, at least increase the legitimacy of the process. And then always the question around the role of digitalization and actionable data in supporting these efforts.
One sentence, because don't misunderstand me. I'm not against citizens panels. I think they are bringing a lot to the policy making, but it is at the end a multitude of tools, and public consultations are part of it. Crowd sourcing might be an incredibly new tool that brings something, but it's not there to replace everything, because let's not forget science-based policy is also something we want to give to citizens. And the scientific basis and the economic impact, the social impact, all these are elements that are taken into account as part of the better regulation process. Of course, there can be always improvements, and the engagement of the citizen is part of this process. But it should be seen in this wider panoply of tools that I would think are making the policy better.
Point well taken on this. It is part of a package of a bigger whole where we need to perceive it as such. But yes, please, if you can.
Yeah, so I'll just start from this as an answer. So when we talk about crowdsourcing, we never mean to, and any digital democracy tool or also participatory democracy, I think that at least at ECAS, we never mean direct democracy, which was something that many politicians, even in Italy, were talking about replacing representative democracy and stuff. No, this is not the case. It's about citizen engagement together with their representatives, together with science-based experts, academics, etc. So all parts of society. When we talk about crowdsourcing, it's mainly a way to engage people in the process. to make sure there's a learning curve, to contribute to civic education, which is not taught in schools, to make sure that they can understand the process, everything is transparent, and they can monitor and, you know, be part of democracy. So this is just in fact, in our Code Europe project, we had the European Environmental Bureau working together with citizens to give that kind of science-based knowledge that was lacking to citizens. But at the same time, we cannot ignore citizens, have their own way of thinking, because they're the ones living their daily lives, and they have certain problems that they would maybe can identify better than policymakers here in Brussels that are maybe sometimes criticized as bureaucratic, too technocratic, etc. So it's just going hand in hand and making sure that crowdsourcing is being complementing. And of course, with the digital, when we talk about crowdsourcing, we never say crowdsourcing is the only solution. We always need to have offline possibilities for people to participate in, because either the elderly, people with disabilities, people from marginalized groups, we try to also keep inclusivity as the basis of our democracy, meaning that we need to make sure that there are digital platforms, but at the same time, offline possibilities to contribute to any sort of citizen engagement. So this was just to clarify. And then I think that the problem with the Green Deal, even if you say that it was a kind of a bottom up, the problem has always been, I think, communication about to citizens about the European Union's policies, because I think that that's the main reason why citizens don't understand. And I'm Italian, and I assure you, and I think it's a lot in many other countries, that politicians, anything that the European Union does, they will take it as their own, you know, work, as something that they did for citizens, and they will rarely mention that that was because of EU funding, that was because of an EU directive. So I think that the main communication problem is not from the Commission. It's actually from the fact that member states in the different countries never actually communicate what has been done at the EU level. And this is something that I've criticized member states for a long time. And then just maybe quickly to go back to the two questions. So on the prosumer, I'm not an expert on it, but I think that but I'm an expert maybe on how citizens think. And I would say that an answer to that is what is missing is incentives and also communication. So these two elements are fundamental. What's in it for the citizen? Why should they become from a consumer to a prosumer? So I think that transition, it is really important to tell them, because as a prosumer, you can do this, this, and this. One example that comes into mind is, for example, here in Belgium and also in Italy, I've seen a lot of people I've spoken to that are like, oh yeah, I'm going to apply for the Belgian subsidies on getting solar panels or making the transition. In Rome, we did the same. My father also was like so happy because Rome actually gave funding for subsidies to do a sort of green transition, better isolation, but they didn't have to pay anything. But everyone started thinking, okay, that's my incentive because I'm receiving some sort of funding. It doesn't have to be always funding, of course, but it has to be what's in it for them. And that's the framework. And communication, because many people don't know about the subsidies. So how do we make them understand that they actually have these things for either the European Union or their local, communities or their governments or whatever. So I think these two things. And on the question on AI at ECAS, we're also working a lot on AI and experiments. So definitely the things that were mentioned was that immediately the first thing that we experimented with AI is how can we digest the contributions from crowdsourcing mass recommendations from citizens, and AI definitely helps there, because one thing that is overlooked when you have any sort of participatory democracy, even digital democracy engagement, is the fact that you lack human resources and financial resources. Because people think that putting something online digitally, and that happened with the Conference of the Future of Europe multilingual platform, you just put it online, but who's going to digest that recommendation? What's going to happen with it? There's always someone behind it who needs to go through everything, make sure that the responses are correct, and how do you put them in the different working groups. So AI definitely can help in that sense, like to do a first filter, and then maybe you have the human aspect of it in a second phase to basic cluster or whatever. But AI is definitely working in digital democracy and many other things, of course. And the open source, this is a debate that we've been having a lot with digital platforms as well. Open source, nonprofit, or companies. I don't have a preference. I think that there are pros and cons in both senses. So I'm not against private companies, selling digital platforms to governments. I think that they have a lot of expertise. I know Citizen Lab, which is now Go Vocal here in Belgium, and they opened up also. They also have an open source software, but it's never going to be the same as the one that they have as a private software. So I'm not against neither of them. I think that there are pros and cons that everyone needs to weigh, especially a government, when choosing one of the two paths, because they can be both beneficial.
Thanks, and also highlighting the importance of communication towards citizens and incentives, and even it doesn't have to be always financial, but even if it's financial, it needs to be communicated again in a way that they can really understand and relate to beyond technical jargon, and trying really to translate in a way that they can understand, that they know about these possibilities, and they know what is it for them to take part in these different initiatives, in public participation, but also as prosumers. So I think that's very important, but also the miscommunication, as you pointed out, how the EU policies then translate into national, regional context, that often there is no recognition also in a way what is coming from the EU, but somehow it gets lost in the process. And that can also in a way discourage citizens from recognizing what's happening and maybe taking more actively an involvement in this kind of processes more actively. Thank you. I see that yes, there is a hand raised, but I just wanted to check also if that there is a hand raised. I will come back to you. Let's just hear from Ruaraidh, but I noted and also if anybody else would like to raise a question, I will give you the floor after Ruaraidh, but then also think about anything, and then when you raise your hand, so we have two hands, and I'm also looking at our online participants. In case you have your questions, please write them, and then I will take them, bring them back to the panel. So Ruaraidh, first to hear from you, and then we get back to the audience.
Thanks. I'll be nice and quick. So I wanted to first of all, Eva, I thought your points were very, very interesting, very insightful around policy making, which I've been involved in. I've been involved in from a public sector side, from an NGO side, and now as a private sector actor. I think, and as an academic, I've been involved in lots of citizen science projects which share a lot of the same concerns around public engagement and who you're actually engaging, because if you're not careful, as we all know, you're really engaging people who are richer and have the time to engage, not people who necessarily need to be engaged or the most. I think one thing when we're talking about sort of that tension that can exist between expert voices in policy and the public's voice in policy, I think a lot of that does come down to what Elisa was talking about, communication, about how we're building support for these kinds of policies on a local level. And again, I want to come back to the work that we've done in County Meath and in the Republic of Ireland, which is we're not, we're absolutely co-designing messaging, but we're not coming from a position of a blank slate on policy, and nor are citizens. The vast majority of people in Ireland, I think something like 90%, according to the EPA's latest research, support more action on net zero, not less. But we're trying to show people what the problems are on a local level, to try and bridge that gap that can absolutely exist from, and people talk about it a lot in terms of Brussels, but it can absolutely exist in Dublin, or it can exist if you're in Trim and Navan, which is the county town. It can absolutely exist at the local authority level. Any kind of policy making distance can be a real challenge. So for citizens, so trying to localize information about why these policies are necessary and show people. Not let them take themselves on a journey to understand, well, it is inconvenient for me, or it would be more convenient for me to keep my current diesel car and drive from home to school or home to work or wherever, but I can now use the information that I've got to understand why these policies are in place and are necessary. And obviously, there's lots of different ways you can do that, and lots of different ways some of them are better than others, and some of them But that's the approach that's that I think is most valuable. And going quickly back to the discussion around prosumerism and what's missing from that EU policy, I thought that the kind of definition of a prosumer, I thought a very valuable thing for business in general, in my experience, is unified, consistent definitions of what we're looking for. One of the real challenges of some policy environments do have, and again, I will speak carefully here, has been a lot of chopping and changing of definitions or of policy, sometimes even of prime ministers, and that has created a great deal of uncertainty for any kind of business trying to act in that space, and it disincentivizes investment of any kind, because you can't be sure that tomorrow what you've done will actually have the value that it has today. So in a very general sense, the more standardization in that respect, the better from a business point of view. And to Sebastian's point about AI and the green transition, this is obviously a huge question, very interesting question. And I'm from, as I say, I'm from an organization that we work on ethical AI, and AI is in lots of different forms is an absolute core element of what we do. So I want to, from that perspective, I actually want to sound a note of caution. I want to go back to what we've been talking about in terms of public engagement and citizen engagement, and say, I think one thing that has become clearer and clearer over the last few years, maybe heightened a little by the COVID pandemic and its attendant restrictions on going outside, the extent to which citizens' lives, people's lives, our lives, are ruled by unaccountable algorithms. What you might characterize as irresponsible AI, where there's no democratic accountability, and there's no way to understand what, for instance, TikTok's algorithm is doing, or Instagram's algorithm is doing, and why it's doing these things, and the citizen has no control over it. I think we have to be extremely careful. I think this is corrosive to trust, to public trust in any kind of setting. So we have to be extremely careful when we talk about using what has come to be AI in the public imagination, sort of large language models like ChatGPT. We have to be extremely careful about how we use those, to be clear that any models of any kind are led by humans, that decisions are not made irrevocably by AI, without the input of human beings, and also in a wider sense that we are able to explain why and how an AI is doing or saying what it is saying, how it's and absolutely down to the level of, like, how is it summarizing these elements, what methods have we used. And there's absolutely developing methods. I know in Trilateral we are doing a lot of work on this around the AI Act and similar, to develop tools to help audit our new Stride AI assurance products. We'll similarly audit these kinds of issues. But the note of caution I would sound is just that we need to build responsibility in the absolute foundation of these tools. Otherwise, I think they will be, not to be too dramatic, they will be corrosive for democracy and for public engagement, if people feel that they're just another way of not being listened to, rather than a way of enhancing how they can be listened to.
Thank you very much, Uri. Among other things you mentioned now, stressing the challenges with the AI, this issue with being a black box where you don't know exactly how information is processed, how do you get different responses based on the inputs you provide, and also the biases that we need to be careful. And
that's something I didn't say that explicitly, and I wish I had, because bias in AI is a huge, and I mean, again, this is a very, obviously this is very much in the public sphere now, but it's again, if we try and do any kind of public engagement without being extremely clear and open with citizens about what that means and what that looks like, I think
at the very best, we're storing up huge problems for the future. making them more responsible in order to avoid these pitfalls that you just mentioned, but also enabling them really to support this involvement, so not to prevent citizens or discouraging them, but actually to try to use them as a tool for good, to build upon the citizen participation, as mentioned, for example, for the follow-up of the crowdsourcing or public participation, because very often that part is missing. How do we take into account what citizens say? What is the follow-up, and that the citizens see that what they provided, that it added value, that it translated into something concrete, not into that they just said something and that it vanished into a thin air. And the AI may be responsible, just building on what was said also by Elisa, for example, could add value among other things, but we need to be aware of the challenges, indeed, as you mentioned, Uri. So thank you. Now, we had also a couple of questions from our participants. So I would like to give you the floor first.
Hello, could you hear me? Sergey Kasyanov, Harvard Alumni Club. Thank you so much for a very detailed presentation, very interesting, to Brooke, to Chris and others. My question, we heard that 48 people are computer illiterate, and they don't know internet and anything. Meanwhile, we know how many platforms now use for citizen engagement and feedback from the citizens, including Jira and so on. So they're pretty complex. So my question is, how representative are those responders with regards to the numbers or social groups? How many citizens they do represent? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and also, yes, gentlemen.
Thank you. My name is Antti Kohopää, coming from Finnish Energy, which is association of Finland-based energy companies. Thanks for organizing this event, this digitalization and utilizing of different kind of data is huge opportunity for our members and our sector. If I may participate this discussion on prosumers first, our people calculated that at the moment we have 6 different kind of frameworks for prosumers, energy sharing, and all kind of let's say active or producer actors. So basically 6 different legal frameworks coming from EU legislation, mainly from Renewables Directive, but also from electricity market legislation. So maybe could be useful to take a look to that existing framework, and to be frank, there are quite many even bit conflicting articles on that topic in place. But then coming to my question, with short introduction from Finland, we have and our members, they have created that kind of digital solutions and different kind of apps and energy and electricity monitoring services for their consumers for decade already, based on smart metering and data coming from smart meters. But no one is wrongly, but really few people were interested about such a data earlier. But after the energy crisis, when prices went up, and not only up, but when we faced huge volatility of prices in the market, people suddenly came curious about their energy use, their bills. They also became curious about how they could optimize their energy use in order to make bills smaller. And at the same time, all kind of service providers came interested about the market, and they started to develop digital solutions, database products, all different kind of opportunities for individual consumers and customers to be more active in the market. But what we saw is that we needed that price signal coming through. So my question for the panel is that what is the role of the market and different kind of market signals for creating this kind of digital solutions? Because when I saw your policy recommendation from that one slide, I didn't see the word market there. Thanks.
Yes, well, let's take also one more question from the audience, and then we will come back.
Thank you. My name is Julia Hoffman. I work for EFOG. We're a company running, for example, the citizen assemblies. Also, we're involved in the Conference on the Future of Europe and facilitation of citizen assemblies. I have a question, or maybe a new topic that I want to raise on this on this discussion. And I joined a bit later, so I don't know if you had already talked about it, but I wanted to talk a bit about populism and how maybe also digitalization can help to conquer that. Because in my experience, when I work with citizens on climate-related issues, on citizen engagement and climate and Green Deal, the Green Deal and climate policies is often perceived more as a top-down approach, and coming in, if we follow this populist dichotomy of we, the people below, and the elite on the top who actually dictates policies to the normal people. So there is this big fear and danger out there that populists gain more power by using this divide. And I'm wondering how these digital tools can actually help to close that gap, because we need to close it so that people actually adopt climate-friendly lifestyles, and we don't have more popularity for populist parties. So I think that, and maybe that's for discussion also for the panelists, like which opportunities do you see for AI to, not AI only, but for digital tools, digital participation to close that gap? So because I see, and I agree with, for example, I think Rory said that we need more local information on climate policies available. So that would be great. And we need that, because only when climate change and climate policies becomes locally tangible, it will have probably an effect on people and may change also their thinking about it. What about fact checking? We know fact checking is only partly helpful when it comes to really conquer populist arguments and other things. Maybe just like wanted to bring in that dimension. What kind of opportunities do you see for digital participation in working against or populist movement?
Thank you for all your questions. And Eva, I believe you wanted to respond to some of the questions.
Yes, happy to give it a start, and I will somewhere bring the discussion back to the marketplace for a moment. And leaving perhaps the questions on public engagement through digital tools to other colleagues who are, I think, even more knowledgeable. I personally believe that technology is neutral. You can use it, you can abuse it. So, TikTok is there, has been picked up more by the rightist parties than anybody else. They used it in order to mobilize their audience. Maybe the Greens were having some barriers, moral barriers, and they lost the battle this time around. So technology is neutral in itself. It's the use of it that can bring societal benefits and progress, or create some difficulties. That's my personal stance. And we should strain, of course, ourselves to bring the progress and not the backward solutions. But going back to the marketplace that I also put in the center in my opening remarks, my team recently has done a study on the polluter pays principle and the application of it across EU policies for environment and climate. So how, if you want, different types of market-based instruments can be used in order to achieve policy goals. The conclusion was that, in particular, in the field of environment, we are hugely making use of the command and control type of measures. So regulations, standards, which are, let's remind ourselves, extremely successful. The quality of environment, the quality of air that we have in Europe, the quality of water that we have in Europe, the biodiversity ecosystem, the protected areas, these are all command and control type of measures. The reduction of emissions are massive success. I can personally testify. I've been for a few months in New York. I had massive asthma issues. I never had it in my life. I was in Cuba, where I entered into Havana. I was getting nausea. These are the achievements in the European continent that we kind of take for granted. But command and control is coming with a certain cost. It comes with a certain cost for the business. It comes with a certain cost for the consumers. Where market-based instruments, and I think that's where the colleague from Finland was alluding to, is to create a certain incentive where there is actually an incentive for the consumer and for the business to adopt a certain type of model, be it for the selling of energy, being for the using of energy, with smart digital solution. If you ask me, the next application of that will be water, smart water meters, because water scarcity or abundance, for that matter, in some periods of time, will be creating havoc in our cities. So either we find ways, including through nature-based solutions, that we give nature back to the cities to create sponges where the water can be absorbed in certain periods and then reused in other periods. Apparently, I learned that brewers in Belgium are masters of water reuse. They know how to keep water when the rains come, and they are selling even water to farmers. So the technology coming in the right moment and somebody having a brilliant idea how to give this information through smart meters to the customers, to the companies, can make a big shift in green transition. Thank you.
For your response, Eva. And Chris, I believe you wanted to respond to the questions and comments.
Yeah, on AI, and it touches upon your comment as well. So you'll be happy to know that AI in democratic processes was designated high risk in the AI Act, so it has extra controls on it already at EU level. But and I think that's definitely the right decision. But there is the second stage, which I think you were alluding to in the room, about getting information on what AI has or what ChatGPT has done. I mean, AI has been around for ages in industry. We've been using it for a long time, but it's burst on the scene. It's taken AI from being an advanced digital skill to a basic digital skill that we can all use, right? So there is huge opportunity there. Touching upon my example of the farmer before, or someone that you mentioned looking to find out what the EU has done for me. This is what AI is very good at, is taking vast amounts of complex information and distilling it into a simple answer, right? So I can ask, for example, how do I obtain solar panel subsidies here in Belgium? I think that was their example, right? Or how I'm a farmer, I want to sell organic carrots from here in Germany to Austria next door. How do I do that? What are the hoops I need to jump through? I think these are questions that AI can help with in the second stage, not the democratic process itself, but afterwards making sense of what we've decided and feeding back on it. Right.
Thank you. Thank you for providing this additional information. Yes, so Elisa, maybe we can hear from you first, and then we wrap up with your response, also building on what we heard thus far, and come back to the paper.
Yeah, I had a few answers to the questions. The first one around representativeness, because he was asking about inclusiveness and making sure that people who are not digitally skilled or there's a digital divide. So the point of representativeness is that I think that each participatory democracy tool can have either representativeness or not. In crowdsourcing, we don't have representativeness. You're just trying to get the mass. It doesn't matter who it is. It's important to get as many people as possible. But when we talk about citizens panels, we're getting representativeness. That means that people who have disabilities, who are from a minority, the gender balance and whatever, they are selected. Yes, so they are selected. So it means that you need to have representativeness to have a good citizens panel. They will always get the people to make sure that they are representative of the population. In crowdsourcing, it's a different tool. We just want a bunch of people. So the quantity matters more than the quality. So the point when I talk about digital democracy is to complement the two tools. And then we have obviously also elections. You just need to make sure that whoever wants to participate can find a way to participate. They don't need to wait for every 5 years to just, go vote. They have different means. So citizens assemblies, and there are complementary ways. Yes, if they know the tools. And also, for example, if it's digital, then make sure that a person with certain disabilities can just send an email to someone and that person will input it to the digital. So it's always like complementing and making sure. The second thing, Finland is a really interesting case because Finland is one of the only countries in the world, I think, that has access to free, accessible internet as a human right. So basically, every citizen in Finland has it as a right. This is something that we were pushing for also at the Conference of the Future of Europe, to have all countries to have this high-speed internet as a human right. Like, just imagine that. That would already make everyone put an effort to reduce the digital divide, because that would be a right. And I think that it's very interesting what he was mentioning about the role of the market. I don't have an example of the role of the market, but I can tell you about the Code Europe project. So maybe you know how long it takes for an entity to actually fund the project. So we wrote this project on air quality before COVID happened. In the meantime, we put air quality as a topic because we had citizens telling us they wanted to talk about that. Okay. Then we had Greta basically going on the streets, and we were like, oh, wow, this is the momentum. If we get the funding for the project, we're going to get loads of citizens because Greta is now like riding the wave. Everyone's talking about the green issues and stuff. We won the project. We started the project. COVID hit hard. So people didn't care about the environment. They were thinking about health issues. They were like, oh, gosh, okay. We started the crowdsourcing. What happened? The Ukrainian invasion, basically. So we had countries where we were asking citizens about air quality, for example, in Estonia, in Latvia, where citizens just didn't care about air quality because they were too worried about the war next door. So what I'm trying to say is not only the role of the market, current affairs, anything that happens influences how citizens think. So as you were saying, there was a crisis and it got citizens to actually use the apps and stuff like that. That's what happened with the Icelandic constitution as well. There was a crisis, an economic crisis, and they started some sort of engagement to get the citizens. So you always need to be careful when you're trying to engage citizens on what's actually happening and how do you get them to jump on board. And the third thing about populism, I think that this is a very interesting example. So how do you get digital tools to close the gap? I can give you an example of two populist parties, the 5-Star Movement in Italy and Podemos, which is not populist completely, but just saying that they used a lot the anger of the people, the frustration of the people. 5-Star Movement already 10 years ago, they were using this platform called Rousseau, which is a digital democracy platform, exactly because they wanted more direct democracy, more citizen engagement. And I mean, that was a good thing. In the end of the day, what they were trying to do as a movement was to get citizens to have more interaction with policymakers, and as crowdsourcing is to give. So I think that there's a huge amount of potential. But what happened with the 5-star movement was the mistake that they made from becoming a movement to a party. Now that changes everything, because being an opposition is easy. But then when you take responsibility, well, look what happened to them like in recent years with their election. So I think that it's good to ride on the wave of frustrations and anger and crisis and get to people to engage, because most probably when everything is okay, there is apathy. I mean, why should I complain? People use democratic tools to actually get frustrations out and to get. So we need to be smarter as like if we're doing things top down, also to, you know, engage people by riding on emotions as well.
Thank you so much for your response to this, and also I think to a large extent you answered some of the questions from online question from Nabila Abbas about some limitations with using digitalization, the questions on digital divide and representativeness, and again that this is a package of different solutions. Yes. It doesn't supplement, that doesn't replace exactly, doesn't replace in-person participation. It adds on top of it, and there are different ways how one can do it, and one can of course do better to increase the literacy, digital literacy, and also overcome the digital divide and support these efforts to combine citizen involvement and digitalization. Mindful of the time that we only have a lot of it left, if any, I just wanted to come back to Brooke for your final reflections, building on what was said during the panel, and also the questions that were raised. I mean, if you want to pick on some of them, in a way, how does that, in a way, fit to our thinking as part of the project and what we did thus far?
Yeah, thanks very much. And I'll try to keep it as concise as possible. I'll start with this topic of populism. So how can digital tools really address that? And I think one key way is awareness. So aiding online media communication campaigns, et cetera, and trying to combat disinformation and misinformation. Also, we talked about the AI Act, et cetera. I think digital tools really play a role in this. It's also about engaging citizens, again, like we say, at the political level, ensuring they're part of this discussion and process. And I'll segue that to a point I want to make about this conversation on trade-offs. I think I agree with the sentiment that this conversation around trade-offs needs to include solutions. With that said, I think if we wait until we have the solutions ready to talk about trade-offs, we risk missing the mark, and that citizens may already, you know, not be on board. They're not included within this decision making. And as we know with participatory democracy, it's not necessarily just about the result, it's also about the process itself and instilling trust and feeling heard and feeling included. Moving to that, sorry, I'm like, going back to prosumerism. Yeah, I think the EU is prepping for having this decentralized, evolved market when it comes to enabling prosumerism. What's missing is a clear regulatory framework. We talked about this communication as well that Elisa had mentioned. We're missing a bit of communication on this. It's a confusing ecosystem of regulations, essentially. But something I think that's really important to highlight here is also inclusivity, in that, you know, energy poor and low-income households are still remain exogenous to these benefits. And that's something that really needs to be addressed. So whether it be ensuring these incentives are communicated, but also more equally accessible. So whether it be through reworking finances or financing and subsidies, so that these households can be more included, offering tools like advice offices, one-stop shops, et cetera. And then a last point I want to make is talking about this limitations of digital tools. So we talked about, you know, AI and the risks involved, et cetera. And a big thing is, like we discussed, and I think like Chris had said, these tools are limited by factors outside of their control. So for example, political will. If we look at the French Citizens Convention on Climate, you know, there's a great use of digital tools, et cetera. But at the end of the day, the political will to actually take citizens' ideas and proposals and put them into action was missing. There's also skills, which we've been talking about a lot, and the need to meet these goals. I think the EU has quite ambitious goals when it comes to digital skills, but we're not necessarily there yet. But there's also a gap when it comes to infrastructure. So access to digital goods, access to 5G internet, etc. And there's also a missing component of literacy. So really, if you have the access to infrastructure, et cetera, do we have the literacy on topics like energy, on topics like data, accessing your data and understanding what it means to share your data and how they can benefit from this data with regards to the green transition is somewhat lacking. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke, for your follow-up reflections on this, on what participants and panelists have said. So yeah, just in conclusion, I would say that we covered a lot of ground in a bit more than 2 hours, but of course it doesn't exhaust the entire discussion. And that's something, I think there is plenty of work to be done in terms of empowering the citizens and communities to take part in the green transition, bottom up, but also top down, as part of be it in the elections, also as part of the participation, but also as prosumers. There is the role for the EU to create an enabling framework. There is also the role for other levels of governance. Digital solutions can provide the tools and can provide interesting prospects for this, actionable data, online platforms, artificial intelligence, notwithstanding that there are limitations, technical limitations, that it's not a replacement for in-person participation. And of course, that there are challenges like digital divide, illiteracy, that simply we need to overcome and to ensure that these digital tools actually add value to our efforts to support the needs of our citizens, communities, and to advance the green transition. We will continue working on this topic, of course, the twin transition, and also on this particular topic of citizen involvement. I would like to thank our panelists, our respondents, and our participants for very active involvement, for your valuable contributions to this discussion. You can also, I see we have the papers that are fresh from the oven at the end, so please be free to take them. Of course, they are available on our website, and happy to have you at our future discussions. Thank you very much and have a nice rest of the day.